So I'm gonna be talking how to go or how to get more impact on Zed and Lucio both. Uh, and then you sent me the replay code, so we'll look at those. And then also give you a couple of examples on like what I'm looking for on how to get more value. So
Okay.
and then afterwards, on probably maybe another session, we can go over because perhaps you already know all this stuff and it's just needing to work on it. And then after like a week or two, depending on how well you um, adjust, which I think looking at right now might be one of the harder things to do. Um, this is like where the majority of your value is going to be coming from, and so it's like a bit harder to improve. Um, Let me just go straight to the Lucio,
Wait,
and then yeah, I'll stream it to you.
you're showing the screen, right?
Not yet, not yet.
Okay. I was confused because you were like, oh yeah, let me just
Okay, yeah, I think you play Lucio on attack. Is it? Yeah. And so let's talk about like how you can use each of your abilities first of all, and then we'll talk about where to position to be able to use those.
Okay.
So I guess in this team composition or in general, what's the best use for your crossfade?
To speed my Zarya in for an engage.
Yeah, yeah. And then what's like so if your job is to enable your entire team, how else can you enable your team with it?
I could dive with my Sombra and Kiriko.
Okay.
And peel for my Ash.
Yeah, yeah. So we're really just looking for opportunities to which they don't come very often, so it's important to note that most of the time you're going to be just building your ultimate, but in the opportunities where you need to, or where you can help your teammates and get more value through helping your like for example like helping your Sombra on the side or speeding your Zarya in main, uh, then you can flex over to those positions. And so I think you have a good understanding of like how to use your abilities. But now let's talk about your positioning and mechanics to be able to do that.
Got screwed over by the pot plant.
Yeah, you can't get through that window, by the way.
I thought you could.
Yeah, common misconception. Yeah, I thought that for quite a while too. But okay, so you're playing on console, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Xbox.
So it might be a little bit different of control set. Do you have jump down to one of the paddles?
No, it's the A button.
Okay. You might want
I
to.
mean, you're technically supposed, like, a lot of people say you can put on, like, your back paddles if you have, or, like, your left trigger. It feels weird to have it there, so I prefer it on my A button.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So when you have jump on your A button, you can't like aim while you're wall riding, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be a problem. That'll like that might be like a hard problem that we have to work around. Because it's very important, like while you're wall riding, that you have your direction and your aiming to be able to control your wall riding and get. I'll show you some like movement mechanics in a second, but yeah. So that first of all, and then second, our positioning here. Let me go back to like oops, your neutral positioning in the fight. Um, I feel like you take really hard engagements onto the side, and instead of making use of the fact that you're like very slippery, and then you could rotate in between doing a ton of things at once, not like multitasking, but just really quickly switching between tasks if you're not getting value. Um, where you can position in between where the enemies are and where your team is, or in between where the things you need to do are. For example, positioning on this high ground here, you can position towards the corner and up here and be wall riding back and forth and get that down. So that's why like it's very important to get wall riding down and have full control of your wall riding, so then you can get the most out of your positioning. So when your Sombra is done engaging, or there's no more value to be had over here, which she's taking space for your team, and it's really good. You're immediately ready to go back to your Zarya, and you can even perhaps stretch it a little. And if your Zarya is playing closer, even help with like at the same time do both. Um, so an example of what I mean by like hard committing to the gauges is like when this Doom engages here. This is good that you're with your Sombra and forcing him out. This is really good here. You're forcing the Doom out. You made space. But now I need you to be wall riding and get to the point where you're just immediately like, there's no more to be had here. And so let's go back to the Zarya and just like start speeding the Zarya.
Yeah, my initial thought in that moment was to shoot the squishies to get ult charge, and then Doom jumped back up and punched me.
Yeah, yeah. But even...
But still,
well,
yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I think getting your thought process is a little bit better. If we're talking about like the maximum potential that you can get out of Lucio, I think against their team comp, you shouldn't really die to anyone except for the Sombra or the Ashe. And even then, the Ashe is very easy to live by unless there are multiple people, and the Sombra is like hard targeting you. So if we can get to the point where you're wall riding and you never, for example, Doomfist, you can always go up against Doomfist and he can't do anything against you unless he's really good. He has to use both of his cooldowns to get up to you, and even if he does, he has to hit every shot afterwards to kill you. Let's continue watching this through. I haven't watched too much of it, but okay, let's talk about your amp and your boop now. So how can you, what are the best situations, or any situations, I guess, because your amp is very versatile. Almost there's a lot of different situations that you can use your amp.
Well, to hard speed engage or disengage, you can use it to give you or some allies healing if potentially your other support has died. You can use it to do certain rollouts quicker. Yeah.
Okay, I think, and then what is the most common scenario do you think that you're using amp?
Both rollouts or hard engagements.
Okay.
Me.
It's kind of a common misconception because those are like the most impactful amps, but actually most of your amps are going to be to build ult charge or save a teammate or yourself. So there won't be too many opportunities for you to be able to just amp in and hard amp for your team or hard speed in, or there's a lot of disengaging moments where you can amp to disengage, but they don't show up nearly as much as like when you're playing in the neutral, nothing is really happening and people are just taking shots at each other and taking trades, and you can use your amp during that time when nothing's really happening and amp your team to get heals out of it. It also helps because you'll keep space if your teammates are healthier in a crucial moment. For example, in a Sombra, like on the side, you can amp your Sombra so then she can win a 1. But if we look at how you're amping, I think I didn't notice you doing anything like terrible with your amps, but I'd like to see that you get it your amps more efficient.
If I'm being honest, I don't usually put too much thought into my amps. I'm just like, oh.
Okay. Yeah, that's one thing that we can immediately improve, where it's just like every single ability that you use should have like a very, very good reason behind why you're using it. And so if you're using it just to use it, that's like the first step of being skillful. But now that you know how to use it, you just explained it to me, all the possible cases, except for like the amp to heal. But now it should be like when you use your amp, it's either because the enemy's forcing you to use the amp and it's like going into the trade, or it's because you see an opportunity where you can get a lot of value out of your amp. Not just like a little, or if it's a little, then it's because there's nowhere else to amp anywhere else. So for example, an amp engage into this Sombra where you're speeding into her is not necessary, but if you amp heal your team here, it would have been okay. And then like the amp on your rollouts where it's not bad, but oh shoot, I keep on hitting that. The rewind.
I don't want to talk about what happened at the beginning when I was playing Brig, okay?
Okay, yeah, all good. We'll just go through one hero at a time. I think that'll be more beneficial. And especially with Lucio, if we can get down the mechanics, I think you'll see the most benefit out of it. So have you watched like a lot of wall riding guides? Well, I guess it's because I'm super used to mouse and
Uh,
keyboard.
no, I've literally just watched a bunch of Red Shell and a bunch of Frogger. I enjoy their videos.
Okay, yeah, same. That's what I do. If you watch SK has really good guides on how to wall ride. Um, and then it'll help you accomplish like the same things that Frogger and Red Shell are doing. So they have a very different playstyle, but it'll help you out a lot and let you have some more value. So I'll show you some techniques that I think that you can immediately accomplish more with.
Okay.
But okay, let's go through and like look at your beats now. Um, Again, like, what do you think is the best use for a beat, and then what do you think is going to be the most common use?
The best case scenario is probably saving your team from a ultimate or a key member of your team from death.
Mhm.
For me, a common case is when I see that we're taking a lot of damage, but we could go in. So I beat, and then I full amp speed in to get everyone to go in.
Okay, yeah. Is that the most common case?
I'd say it's about 50-50, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, the denying an enemy ultimate is definitely one of them, especially if the enemy has a beat, where it's like much better to counter beat and not risk dying, or having anyone on your team die. It's basically to keep the enemies at bay, but I think what's very underrated is using like the beat in a very plain and unordinary way, where yeah, like if your teammates are low in a team fight, even if you can't speed in, or if it's just one teammate who's about to die, it's worth using that beat to save them. And get that like small, minimal amount of value that feels non-heroic. But it's kind of like the same thing as a pulse bomb, where it's like one small thing can turn the fight, and I'd rather see you using it in a place where you get guaranteed value rather than trying to hold it for another situation. I think you did pretty well on not holding your beats, which is good.
Yeah, I remember watching one of my replays once and realizing I held my ultimate for about 3 minutes and cringing.
Yeah, that's a long time, but in this replay you did pretty well. So
Yeah, so I just try not to hold my ultimates.
okay, so let's go to your boop, and then so how do you think, like, what's the best scenario for a boop? There are so many scenarios, or let's just go through like, yeah, exactly what we were doing with the other abilities.
So you can boop someone into your team, boop someone away from your team, or a player on your team who you might be getting engaged on, like a Winston jumping, for example, or a Diva boosting. You could use boop to boop someone off a map, obviously, and you can use it as a way of damage to finish kills, potentially.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what really comes to mind.
And then what are the most what are you gonna be using it for the most?
For me, what I tend to find is usually either extra damage or just booping someone away. Like, it's kind of hard to find openings to boop someone into my team.
Yeah, I think, and then specifically booping away. Are you booping away like to protect, or are you booping away to, or like? Because what I'm looking for is booping away to deny an enemy ability or engage, specifically, not just like to keep your team alive. Where, for example, if you're in a 1v1 and there's an enemy like Genji, for example, where it doesn't really matter if you really boop him away at the moment, even though it'll deal less damage, versus if he's like after he used his dash and directly onto your teammate, then you can boop him. Or even better, yeah, like when a queen uses her axe, that's like the best time to boop. Or if a Doomfist shifts in, then you can boop him to displace him so he's not ready to punch.
I never really thought about that, but yeah, I do a lot of that stuff. Like, if a Genji dashes in, I boop him into a corner to disrupt him.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
example. Although most Dooms, what I find, they have these, like, they do the stair slam, so you don't even get an opportunity to boop.
yeah, yeah. So I think just in general, after going over these scenarios and how you can use your abilities, saving them for when you can only use them to their maximum potential or to like a very good potential, because using your cooldowns for like every situation is like one thing, and then now let's trim them down to like only the really good situations, and you'll find that you'll be producing much more value for your team. And then let's go over your survivability. Mm-hmm.
To wash my hands. I've just eaten my dinner.
Yeah, all good, all good.
Yeah. Uh,
Okay. So let's go over. I'm gonna tell you like some things that I want to see you do in your gameplay. Which on Lucio, you're very flexible as a support. And then also how to accomplish those with your mechanics, because there's some gaps in your mechanics where as soon as you understand, I think, you'll be able to get the hang of it. But first of all, on your settings on Lucio, do you have backwards wall riding on?
yeah.
Okay, good. And then do you play with what is that setting? It's a wall jump on release, or no?
Not actually sure. Let me check. Give me like 2 seconds.
Okay. The default is on, and that's just preference. I just am curious, because the way you do things will vary slightly.
We're here to be heard. Double boom, baby. This beat will you up.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. It's on.
Okay. Cool. I'll swap it to on just to have a better example. So, yeah, one of the positional things that I want you to be able to do is, I see you already kind of doing it, which is like playing with your Sombra. You can also position yourself, for example, let's say that your tank is right here and that the enemies are approaching from over here. Instead of playing all the way up front with your Sombra, wait until that your Sombra engages, and then you can wall ride over, and that way you're playing in the middle and playing like in limbo to be able to like default to playing with your tank, so you're still building ult charge very quickly. And then when the enemies decide to go in,
Just jumping in whenever.
yeah. So basically, you're in this, by doing this, you're setting the tempo. So to the enemies, it feels like they have no control, because it's like they can't get any value once they go in, but once they go in, you're immediately denying them value, but you're still getting value at all other times. And then, okay, let's talk about how to do that. Also, if you immediately go to high grounds, and especially if you see an enemy on the high ground, you deny their high ground, and you were trying to do that earlier, but there were a couple of things that I wanted to talk about to be able to help you deny the high grounds better, or wall ride to get there. One,
one thing is, in high ranks, most people in high ranks are Zimmers, which means they plug in mouse and keyboard, which gives them unfair advantage.
That's
so
terrible.
It can be really difficult to dive high rank hit scan.
Okay.
Most of hit scan in high ranks are Zimmers.
On the bright side, I think if your movement is good enough, you can still mark, but maybe not kill those players. So
Yeah, I do kill some of them. It's just it can be a bit difficult. Most of them just got to high ranks because of their aim, to be honest.
hmm. Uh, let's talk about, because I see you trying to climb a lot of corners, and you're attaching to the wall pretty well. Um, but let's how do I phrase this? So Lucio's wall riding is dictated by where you're aiming, actually. So this is why I was asking about your keybinds and why it's a problem. Because if, for example, you see me attached to this wall and
Yeah,
or
no.
yeah, attached to this wall, it'll jump me a certain height. Versus if I'm looking up, it'll jump me even higher. And so where this
Well, if you look
matters,
down, it goes more horizontal.
yeah, yeah. And so climbing up to those high grounds is really important, and it's really important that you get up to the high grounds where you can shoot, boop, and melee. At least just to like provide some resistance to the enemies getting to the high ground, which will happen a lot. And that's like a lot of your value on Lucio is just being annoying to the enemy DPS and not allowing them to do what they want. Especially in competitive when there's not like the best opportunities with your tank because they're not being considerate to your to be able to use the speed. So if you can, before you start climbing the high ground, if you want to keep your keybinds, look directly up. Versus, I noticed that you're looking like to the side, and then this is like impossibly hard to climb the high ground. Versus looking directly up, and you immediately climb the high ground in like maybe half the time.
Okay.
Also, I think for you to be able to stand, or high grounds are very important on Lucio because they provide you like less danger, so you can survive easier, and then also it provides you an off angle where it's easier to shoot from the high ground than it is from the low ground and hit shots. Because of the enemy movement, and also because you can see more of the hitbox. So if you're able to get up to the high grounds and stay on a high ground like this, where you can still heal your team, that's like way more preferable than just standing behind your tank. Most of the time, you're not going to be able to get that. And for example, if you're here and your team is, let's pretend they're here, and the enemies are like out here, it's going to be very hard to get a high ground if there isn't any. So you need to be.
I can just stay wall riding onto a wall and shoot.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's very important to be like adaptable, and then you can wall ride and then like limit your time shooting and then go back. I'm not doing this very correctly because I'm not on my. I used to play on. Yeah, but
Used
yeah.
to do what?
I used I used to play on release to jump, but now it's kind of screwy because I swapped it over. Because there's like one tech that you can't do, only one tech that you can't do, if on the other setting, or on release to jump, where it's wall skimming. Where here I'll just show you if you're interested in changing your settings. But for example, if you want to get through this doorway and maintain all your speed, if you're on release to jump, you're always going to hit your head. Versus if you're not on release to jump, you can do a one tap, and it sends you lower.
Okay.
I'm dead. Okay, but and then that way, so like for example, I can now hold corners because it's a bit more controlled, and then you can still get the same value on healing your team and shooting at the enemies at the same time up on the high ground. And that one's really important because it's gonna happen like every single game. Or
I'll give it a try.
and then let's also talk about I think a variation of that is let me find a good example. So corner and gap wall riding. So if you're on a gap,
You go left to right.
yeah, left to right, and then yeah,
I'll try to.
inverted corners. So for example here, you can stuff your back against it and then just sit here like this, and this will happen a lot. I think I saw you doing it once or twice, but in different chokeholds where you can just get that and just maintain the high ground for free, and when they shoot you, you just immediately fall down, and there's no
also,
cost.
I also find little corners like that are the quickest way to climb walls because you can go left, right, left, right, left, right on the corner.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go back to the. I haven't watched any of the other replays, so let me see if there's something that I wanted to talk about in one of the replays. Was that the only replay that you sent?
No, I gave you 3.
Oh, okay. Hold on, let me look
But
for them.
that the one you were on was the only one that was a win.
Okay. Oh, it was before, that's right. I think, and then I can talk about more your positioning. Oh wait, there's one more thing I wanted to show you in the practice range. So the way to use Boop to get more damage, you've probably seen the combo before, but I think I need to see it more in your ranked games where so let's say you're wall riding towards someone. Optimally, you're above them and wall riding towards them like this. You shoot 4 and then you boot melee. And what's gonna happen is you're probably not gonna hit the 4 shots. Let's say you miss all 4, but after you boot melee, they'll be in the air and then you can shoot them because they have a predictable movement where it's just like straight forward and down.
Okay, yeah. I know the combo is just like sometimes it's a bit scary to close the gap.
Okay.
If they're like mercy pocketed especially, which is pretty much every game.
Okay. A tip for
Which
that
also
is
means I get a lot of mercies on my team. Which also means I want to try.
okay. If you need to close the gap to get close to DPS, and then if they're mercy pocketed, it's probably not good like to hard engage. You can do it like once, and then back up just to pressure them and just to get them to stop looking at your team and look at you for a split second. Otherwise, most of the time in your engages, you're gonna end up like having to boop and then continue shooting. But after your boop, I need to see that like you align them in your crosshair and you get the 4 shots after you boop.
Okay.
So I see you spamming a lot, which is good, but as long as you're able to get that like boop and then 4 shots while they're in the air, that's a lot of free damage that you're going to be able to just 1v1 people with. And comboing it with the, for example, like you're spamming and then you boop and then you melee, that is going to be improve the amount of kills that you're getting. So when you're contesting those high grounds, unless you're playing against a really good DPS player, they'll get like trashed on pretty much, and you'll just
Or I'll get hindered.
yeah, if you don't get hindered by a Cassidy nade. But I think that's like pretty much most of what Red Shell and Frogger are doing, where they find ones on the side that are really good engages for them, and then they make use of that tech pretty much not exclusively, but that's the most explosive that you can be, and are able to like get the kills because of that. So oops, R10 S2C.
There might have been an update which but you've already downloaded it then.
Let me take a look at this map. Oh, I think this is where you're
You
playing,
have a
Zen.
lot of people you're coaching right now. That's a lot of replays.
Yeah. I'm also looking at players to trial them on a team. So
Okay.
yeah, I think we can go over Zen or different support at a different time. I'd rather just go over one support at a time, so then you have like very concrete things to work on. Let me see how very checks.
Okay.
60. So I'm watching VODs for like at least 4 hours a day.
Old. That must be boring.
Yeah, it can get pretty boring. Sometimes it's fun if you can talk to other people, especially. You're on Zen most of the time. We can talk about Zenyatta. I think there's a lot of. Yeah, go ahead.
When I play Zen, I either do like the more orthodox stay far back and shoot kind of style, or I just go on stupid flanks that sometimes work. But
Okay.
if I have like a tracer, what I try to do, I try to be the one to engage, because they don't usually like a tracer or sombra. I try to be the one to engage because they don't expect it, and it also it also potentially gives myself the upper hand. But sometimes it ends up biting me in the ass because I don't have a mechanical skill sometimes.
Okay, gotcha. I think. Okay, let me. So for your Zenyatta, the orb management is one thing that you can just immediately do that'll provide you a ton of value. So, I see you orbing the enemy. Yeah, the enemy tank. And then one thing that a lot of players don't understand on Zenyatta is enabling your DPS over your tank is much better, because the other healer is other support is dedicated pretty much to holding your tank up, unless it's like a Brig or a Mercy. And even then,
Yeah,
the
like
other.
I said, Shanka Baby's a really good Doomfist player who is my friend and we were dueling at the time.
Even if you're duoed with your tank player, unless they're like very critical and you need to save them at all costs, it'll actually provide more opportunities for your tank player if your DPS are also making space. And so the way that works, for example, let's go back to this point here where they're out in the open. Your Doomfist can only do so much when he goes in. But if your DPS are also pressuring and making space and forcing them into these terrible positions, and that'll come just like if your Sojourn is up on the bridge and the enemy DPS can't deal with them, they'll have to back up and the Queen can't go in. So it forces them into a terrible position. So if you, and not even through kills, just through the amount of pressure that it creates for your team, where the enemies will be in a terrible
It's like
position
shooting a fish in
always.
a barrel.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. And it'll just lower the amount of risk that your team has to like deal with because there won't be any flankers because your DPS will take care of them. And then the tank player will never be able to push out, especially if you're discording them. So I think, yeah. Other than that, your playstyle sounds pretty, good. Otherwise, I would recommend looking at the enemy team comp and understanding what threats there are to you, especially on Zen, where, and then let me go over.
I'd say the main thing is cross-map one-shots from the enemy Zen and Hanzo and flanks from the Tracer.
Yeah. Just understanding where the Tracer is. On your Havana, because Havana is like a very, very Zenyatta map, even though he's not in meta, you can still play Zenyatta. If maybe not like at the highest levels of play, you'll see Zenyatta, but he's very solid on these maps if like your enemies aren't the best in the world.
I'm not sure about NA, but in EU, there's like 1 or 2 people on the leaderboard who actually play Zen. I'm like one of.
Wow.
Like, there's
Okay.
almost no Zen players in high ranks.
Yeah. NA has like 0 Zen players in high ranks right now. Maybe 1.
I've asked like other people who are NA in high ranks on console, and they say, "Oh yeah, Zen is everywhere."
Oh really? On console? Maybe that makes sense
NA,
because because you can just like deny the enemy
EU,
tank.
it's just, like never.
Okay. So when
It
you're
was Marcy.
when you're playing against enemy DPS snipers especially, and even against like anyone, if you can see the enemy tank as a general rule, just left click the enemy tank and you're gonna open up the map so well for everyone else and yourself. Even though it might not feel like you're doing too much, and especially some games you won't end up doing like very much, having this default of, unless you're getting like a lot of kills, unless you're like really diffing the enemy DPS, just discord and hard left click the tank.
What I try to do is I don't want to get one shots.
Oh yeah. And
Yeah, I one shot them before they can one shot me. That's my hope.
okay, yeah. That's in the situation where, okay, most of the time, for example, like after this hog rounds the corner, you won't be peeking the Widow anymore, and so you'll just be able to shoot the hog. So when you are peeking the Widow, one thing that I want you to do is always be close to a corner so you can control when the enemy can shoot you. Playing the corners is very important because if they control when they can shoot you and you're in the open, they'll always have the advantage on you. So especially like when you're on high ground up or like standing out in the open, or I'm pretty sure you were at the high ground at the very beginning of the round. You charge your orbs behind the wall, and then only when you're ready to shoot do you peek, and you just make sure to aim exactly where you know they're going to be or where they can be, and predict or use like the information. For example, you saw the Widow and then you shoot.
I killed the Widowmaker though.
Yeah, which is really good. But then don't peek again while you're charging your orbs. So it'll reduce.
I wanted to see if I knew anyone else was there.
Even then, because if they're on Hanzo or anything,
Charlie fired maybe.
Yeah. Any damage that you take here is going to pressure you off from being able to provide value again in the future. Otherwise, you're gonna like retract from this guy's healing on the tank, or one of your DPS, or someone who really needs it. So any amount of unnecessary damage is really good to negate. And that means like everything except for exactly when you shoot your first orb, you should mostly be behind the corner. You can like jiggle it just to get the info. and like jiggle peek the corner, like only for info, maybe once or twice, and then you can peek a next corner. But I see you doing a lot of charging orbs out in the open, and that's gonna implementing this habit will help you out in the long run. It'll help you out from dying like super unnecessarily, and Zen should be the support that you die like the least on any composition.
Yeah.
Okay.
I try. Sometimes my other support doesn't turn around.
Mhm.
Like, if I don't have a mechanical skill to beat a flanker, if my other support like doesn't turn around, I just have to insta swap, which is a bit annoying
I think
sometimes.
most of the time your
But that's more of
positioning,
a positional mistake, usually.
yeah, your positioning should allow you to play independent of the other support until they have like full dive. Like if they have 3 players looking at you, 2 or 3, and even with 2, you can still position a little farther back, and it's worth it because their entire goal is to kill you. So just not by not dying, and even though you lose a little bit value, it completely denies the enemies, and so it's even more of a loss to them if you don't die. But for the most part, unless they're hard diving you, you can always survive without a support. Even if you only hit 1 shot against an enemy tracer, that's just enough to keep her from engaging on you. With good positioning. So, for example, if you're like out here and you hit 1 shot and you're like, he lied. No, well, the positioning, health packs, high grounds, and make them rotate
I'm
into
not
you
sure
in
if
angles.
it's the same, but tracers and like sombras, they will not translocate until they have confirmed a kill. They are like really weird. They will never back down until they're dead.
Okay. Maybe it's because they know that you won't kill them, which at that point, that's just like a 1v1. You have to be able to be lethal. Again, Sombra is a different
What
issue.
I try
Where,
to do
yeah.
is like, especially if there's a sombra, I'll try and close the gap, maybe get a kick in, disrupt her enough, and boop her. A bit like you said with Lucio, boop her into the air for a predictable path.
Yeah, try to play in a spot where you always have a corner. So especially against the Sombra, like in the high ground is a good place because if she appears behind you, you can LOS her this way, and you put your Discord on, and you have a really good 1v1 with the Discord. Otherwise, if she appears in front of you, which I don't know why she would, you can always back out or go to the health pack. Health packs aren't as reliable on Zenyatta, but the corners for sure.
Yeah, because you have a passive regen and a shield regen, so I just usually just hide behind cover for like a sec.
Yeah. And in the 1v1s especially, for example, if a Sombra uncloaks over here, you can shoot and Discord in between your shot, and then hide behind the corner, and then be able to duel her with the advantage, because she doesn't know where you are, and you know where she is. So you should always be able to shoot her first. And then she'll probably translocate away unless you miss like 3 shots, even after you know where she is. Do you have any
Sometimes
questions?
they'll like one clip me before I can turn around. Just feels bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for that, I think if you're playing behind a corner, and then that's just like,
Unlucky.
yeah,
sometimes.
kind of unlucky.
Like,
If it's a
I have one
Sombra,
of
yeah.
my friends who's really good at Sombra.
Mhm.
But like, if we get into the same match, which happens quite a decent amount, maybe once or twice a week,
Mhm.
like they will specifically wait until I reload or something,
Oh, okay,
and
yeah.
then immediately come out of stealth, and it's really annoying because if I start reloading, he immediately just one clips me.
Mhm. If you're playing a corner in those situations, that's just unlucky. Because you can't like 180 and shoot them because you're on controller, so that's just like,
Yeah,
yeah,
the max sense isn't too fast, and even then, it's like to the point because you have the joysticks. If you have max sense,
yeah,
you have like no precision.
yeah. Um, okay. Do you have any questions about like the things that we were talking about today? Otherwise, I think we're almost out of time.
No, not really.
Okay.
You said everything in a really clear way that I understood.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. That sounds good. Yeah. If you have questions about like um anything we talked about, feel free to DM me, and then also another review in the future. So to be fair, like it's hard for me to VOD console players because I have to like think how it's different. So it's a bit interesting because like the wall writing, it's like I don't know exactly how good of a wall writing you can get And then like the Zen thing, it's like if you're on PC at this level, it would be like you can be able to contest the Sombras. So it's a bit different. But there's still a ton of like areas in which you can get value just by for example, like orbing your DPS and pressuring the enemy tank, where it'll just immediately get you a ton of value because of the space on the map.
Yeah, one thing is, the reason why I mentioned the Discord server thing a couple times
Mhm.
is I can't actually like stream a game or do like enter a game unless I'm like in a Discord voice channel. I can share my screen, but I can't actually leave the Microsoft Edge app.
Okay, okay. Um, that should be fine. I think most of what we'll be talking about is the replays, and then because there's a ton of like higher level stuff that we can get into first. Um, but for now, I think getting the most value out of your kit on Lucio and Zen would be optimal. Otherwise, it's like a ton of stuff to load onto you, and like too
Okay.
much stuff to work on at the same time. So it's better to work on like very small things and get those down very concrete and build a foundation. It's like if you skip a math class, you'll just be super lost if we go on. All right. Yeah. So feel free to DM me, and then I'm gonna head out to another coaching session. So yeah.
Okay. Maybe in a week I'll see if I have any games where I try to, where I think I did an okay job at applying what you told me.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah.
See ya.